Hi, everybody. Welcome to Purpose People podcast. We got an amazing guest with us today. It's Dr. Ant. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for taking the time to drive all the way up here. You're not Doctor Who or a Time Lord, but you're a doctor of what? Would you tell us what doctor is?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. My doctorate officially is in business management, subset mindset, and subset the creation of switched on thinking. But really, I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm definitely not a GP. But my doctorate is all about how we think and why we think, and how we become from what we think.
So, you're not a Time Lord then?
Oh, if only.
So, obviously, we've known each other for a while now, and we've obviously been for a walk this morning. Actually, had a really good
lovely,
chat.
yeah.
Lovely. And one of the things that you shared is that you've been on a journey, which is quite a good journey, and I think the journey for people that are listening, I think it's worth you telling your story, because I think that it's important to realize that life isn't perfect and it doesn't always go in the way that you planned it. So do you want to just start a little bit? You can go back as far as you want, but just start, because obviously you were a high flyer doing some amazing stuff, and then things began to change. So do you want to start there and we'll go from there?
Yeah, let's do that. And I think like when you and I were talking this morning, it's so important just to be real, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also to be a bit vulnerable, because in that higher life that you referred to as I used to fly in, kind of there were times when I didn't want to show my vulnerability, because, we have to present to the world that we're doing so well all the time.
Yeah.
That's what we think. But my backstory, and it really goes like this, that since 2013, I've always worked. Mum and dad did the best they could, but I didn't go to university or anything like that. We lived in a 2-up, 2-down house in Maidstone in Kent.
Yeah.
At that time, we didn't even have a bathroom. We just had an outside toilet. That was it. No central heating.
Right.
So it's pretty basic, and I guess that was probably the seed that was in me for wanting to do the best I could, because I didn't want my kids to end up in that situation, because you know what kids are like at school. The kids can be pretty spiteful, and I remember being bullied and having the mickey taken out of me at school for living in a house with one tap in the whole house, and that tap was for cooking, cleaning, washing,
just about everything.
Washing your hands after going to the toilet, and then cleaning your peeled potatoes. It's just it's just like, you know what kids are like, right?
Yeah.
So I subscribe to that Western way of the world, that we always have to do our best, and be our best. And I was pretty unaware of what's really going on in the world. I was just a little worker doing my best. So I've always worked running my own show for as long as I possibly can remember. And I remember at 13, I used to have an egg round. So a farmer would turn up once a week with a box of eggs, and I'd have to separate those into packets of 6 and walk up and down my street and sell the eggs to turn a profit. So that little entrepreneurial spirit was always there.
Yeah.
And I don't want to bore people with all the details of what went on that journey of success, but to shorten it down, I just worked as hard as I possibly could, and I always did the best that I could at the time with what I had. And the next bit I'm going to say, I'm not saying for showing off, I'm saying it so that I can put a stick in the mud. So I can say, well, this is where I got to, but then this is what happened.
Yeah.
So if we go to 2015, I had reached that point of becoming a self-made multimillionaire. Yeah. I had everything that we think we want from a materialistic point of view. I had successful businesses. One of my businesses was a tea-based product, and I used to import tea from China, and we created a brand of tea. We were the number one product in Holland and Barrett, and we used to sell in Harrods. In fact, we used to sell globally, And that was a very exciting business, because, as you mentioned, high flying. I was flying out of countries on a weekly basis. We had our supply chain was China. We had our back-end technical support was in India. We had our financial processing in Iceland. We had our taxation base in Cyprus. We were all over the place, and that was a very high-flying business. But although I had all this material success around me, which everyone thinks is what we want, the big farmhouse and all the cars and, I ended up with a collection of 19 American muscle cars. I mean, what can one person do with 19 American muscle cars?
Yeah.
Like Mustangs and Corvettes and stuff like that. In fact, I did do something with them because I turned them into another business of doing race experience days around Brands Hatch and Goodwood, where we would put around 600 people a day through the racing seat of a track-prepared Mustang or Corvette with a qualified race instructor beside them. And they would drive that around the circuit, re-experiencing that whole feel of driving a big thundering V8 car around a race circuit. But that was just a little tip of excitement of stuff that was going on. But do you know what was really interesting was, although I had all this material stuff, I was always chasing tomorrow. And when we were talking earlier on, and I mentioned a thing which I was doing at the time, which I didn't know existed at the time, but I do now, and I talk about it now, and I've given it a name. And I was living in a state which I call deferred happiness. And I'm sure that some of the people out there will either know they're doing it themselves, or they'll know of somebody that uses these words. And if you hear these words, just be aware of it. And it goes like this: I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I get that new business deal. I'll be happy when we go on holiday. I'll be happy when we move to the new home. I'll be happy when, what's wrong with being happy now? Yeah. And that's the challenge, is that it was always a deferred happiness, which kind of falls hand in hand with the way that the Western capitalist world works, is that we're always chasing growth.
It's an interesting one because I've come out of a lot of entrepreneurial type hubs and networks and stuff like that, and there is that perception where it's growth at any cost, and often it's at cost to the individual person's mental health.
Right, absolutely.
Because it's grow, and no one stops and say, well, how big's enough, or what kind of life do you want to live? Yeah. And we don't ask those questions early enough because you could end up with 1,000 employees, but unless you are skilled at raising leaders up, it's a big job for one person to manage, type thing. So it's for me, it's a case of, growth at any cost. That happiness as being an event is quite common. It's like, if I get to this point, then I'll be happy. Or if I get to that point, I'll be happy. And you actually then don't even live life in the present.
Correct.
And I think you end up, there are different styles of people. There are people that kind of learn from the past. There are people that are good at living in the present, living for the moment. Yeah. And there are people that are very futurist. And I find a lot of entrepreneurs are very futurist. Yeah. They're always trying to create a better tomorrow and whatever. Yeah. But the negative aspect of that is to never live in the present. Yeah,
and that's exactly what happened to me. What happened was, because I was always chasing tomorrow, and I can talk about this now from a technical neurological point of view, because that's what I've changed my life to understand, although I didn't know this at the time. What I didn't know was that at that time, because I was always chasing for tomorrow, I never had any sense of achievement in the here and now. Yeah. Because tomorrow never exists until it becomes today, and then today's become yesterday. And unless we experience happiness and fulfillment and joy and appreciation and achievement, none of those things can we actually experience in the future until the future becomes today. Mm-hmm. We talk about, we'll be happy when, but until it becomes today, it's impossible. We can't feel how we're going to feel tomorrow until it's now, because feelings in there and now. So what happened was, because I was living in deferred happiness, I actually become really unhappy. Right. And when I become really unhappy, in fact, happiness is all we want to become, isn't it, as human beings? Because that's all we're after. We come out of the womb as happy, trusting souls, and it's only life's journey which turns us into miserable buggers. It's like, we just want to be happy, because if someone is genuinely happy, we don't want anything else.
But it's often the first question we say when we meet someone, like, how are you? Yeah. Apart from what you do,
how many people answer it honestly?
No, exactly, they don't. But we're judging another person's experience or life experience, almost whether it's consciously or subconsciously, based on their answer of happiness.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. And contentment and all that stuff that goes with that. But the reason why I'm here today, trying to help other people, which may be gravitating towards a corner I was in. Yeah. Because my mission now is to help people avoid this tricky corner, which I'm going to talk about. And the corner that I found myself in was because I was never experiencing the here and now happiness, and I was always chasing. As I mentioned, I become unhappy, I become miserable. And with that, I become angry, I become arrogant, I become all those things that go with chasing, and trying to get something. And when it doesn't happen, anger and all that stuff that comes with it. Anyway, and then what happened was I started to feel ungrateful for what I had. And so many people, my friends and family, saying, "Ant, you've done amazing. How come you've got all this, and this? It's incredible." And inside of me, of course, I was paying face to it. I was saying, "Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's superb." But inside, I'm feeling, "You miserable bastard, Ant. Why aren't you appreciating this? Why aren't you really appreciating how you feel? Because everyone else thinks that you should." And that whole conflict comes in. And then when I started to feel ungrateful, that then started to lead to other negative feelings of, well, I don't deserve this.
Okay, yeah.
And then that starts a slippery slope. Well, look, I'm going to fast forward this slippery slope 9 months into like a few minutes now. I ended up in such a dark place. And now I just want to warn everybody, I'm going to talk about suicide, okay? But I'm going to talk about it with a happy ending. And I just want to preempt that. I ended up in such a dark place. It was April 2015. We owned a farmhouse, as I mentioned earlier on, and we had this big carved table out in a brick-built patio area. The kids had gone to school, and I was sitting there at this table. Now, I'd done the hardest thing that any human being can ever do, and that was write my goodbye note to my kids. Now, when that happens, that brings you to a point of clarity which most people never really get to.
Yeah.
And I was about to disappear, and I remember the crazy way my logical brain was thinking or not. And it was thinking, well, this is a good time because the kids are at school. What a crazy way of thinking. But what happened was I was about to disappear. I was 30 seconds away. And as I was about to disappear, a little bird sat down beside me, a little robin bird. And as this robin chirped, I'm not a religious guy. We've had a conversation about that. But I'm a very aware guy. And when this bird chirped, I thought to myself, it's either shouting out for its mate, defending its turf, or calling out for its kids. Now, when my mind processed that, it brought me into a sense of here and now where I've never been before. It brought me into a sense of awareness where I was thinking, what am I about to do? This is all so wrong. Yeah. It brought me a sense of awareness and an awakening. I don't want to say I've seen the light because people tie it to religion, and I don't mean that. It brought me to a sense of awareness of self, of what's really going on here, what has really driven me to this point. And at that point, I got off that roundabout. In fact, I made so many rubbish decisions that I lost everything.
Wow.
And ended up down to like 15 quid, I think we had in the end. So, but what I did have, which is more valuable than any money, any Mustang or Corvette or any material thing, was I had this new sense of awareness and purpose, which I'd never had before. And that sense of purpose was in the here and now, not tomorrow, not yesterday, but the same place where that bird was. It's right here, right now, what's important, because it's only that here and now, right here, right now, which really is important, because tomorrow doesn't exist until it becomes today, and yesterday's gone, so we can't do anything about that. So it's right now. So I don't want to feel like I'm rambling here, but this is so important, because when I got to that place of thinking this is so wrong, the entrepreneur kicked in me. Was it an entrepreneur or was it the logical problem solver? Maybe they're the same thing.
Maybe, maybe,
right?
yeah.
And I thought, hang on a minute. What on earth drove me to that corner? What made Ant wake up that morning and make a decision that was the best opportunity?
Yeah.
Which it wasn't. But what made me think that? So I went on a mission. I needed to understand, as human beings, why do human beings feel the way we feel? Why do we do the things we do? But most importantly, I wanted to understand, what could I do to be the best version of myself for me and my loved ones, and me and my kids and my other half? What could I do for me? Not for everyone else, but to make me the right person for me, because then I can help other people. So I went on a journey, and we gave up the high roller coaster life. We ended up buying an absolute rotten Dutch barge of a boat, and for 2 years I became Bob the Builder. For 2 years I had to build my family a home because we had nothing.
Yeah.
So we bought this old boat, which was completely rotten. And for 2 years, I become the electrician, the plumber, the painter, the carpenter. And luckily, there's no red tape when you own a boat, so you don't have to confirm or comply with building regulations.
Yeah, there's no planning or anything.
You just do what you want, which is, thank goodness for that. So I did. I spent 2 years building a home for me and my family. So we had somewhere to live and be safe and be warm and to enjoy life again and get stuff back together. As I was doing that journey, I then started thinking again about what we can do to be why we feel and why we do and what we can do to be the best. And I started to ask a lot of questions, deep questions, like what is this thing we call life? What is it all about? And then I started thinking, not just from a spiritual or religious point of view, but from a materialistic's the wrong word, a material, cellular structure, physical matter point of view. So I started to spend a lot of time researching and understanding the big minds out there. The minds like Tesla, Einstein, Milton Erickson, Professor Bruce Lipton, all those guys that understand what is it that makes a human being, this mind and matter thing. And I really got into a guy called Bruce Lipton, and he's a stem cell scientist from the 1960s. And he explained things in such a way that what makes you and me sitting here, these two fellas in their meat suits, what is it that makes you and me? And I now know and understand that what we are individually is a collection of around 70 trillion cells. Wow. And each individual cell has a mission to become something, but it becomes something based upon the messaging it gets from our body, from our mind, from our DNA, and from the environment. Yeah. And I learned from him, actually, what is this thing we call a human being? I then went on to discover a lot more about what the mind is, and actually the mind, spirit, and human being, it's all just one, isn't it? Or is it? I don't know. We went down that road. I went down that road, trying to understand, because so many people, when we refer back to Descartes, when he set out what we call the Western medical culture of that, if it's the body and it's physical, we fix it with what we call medicine nowadays. Yeah. But if it's the mind, well, we don't really know how to do that. We'll leave that to church, leave that to the religion, we'll leave that to a different faith.
Or we pill it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's a whole nother story, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. That's another rabbit hole.
So I got my head around that, and I thought, okay, but I don't know it, but I got a good feeling of what this mind and body, a sense of awareness. That little robin's chirp that made me wake up and think, what's really going on out here. And then I started to understand from a neurological point of view, because I've always been interested how the mind works, because my business mind has always been, what do people want? What problems do people have? Let's try and solve them. That's what business is, isn't it, right? Yeah. So I've always been going down that road, and I then started to research into solution-focused therapy, hypnotherapy, then basic human biology and cellular structure. Then I went down the road of understanding epigenetics, which is a thing which was introduced to me by Bruce Lipton. And epigenetics is, when I use the word environment, I don't mean just air and pollution. I mean what's outside us as a human being. Now, other people is the environment. The food we eat, that's part of the environment. The area we live. And so epigenetics is what's outside the body affecting the inside of the body, which presents itself as problems to the outside of the body. Yeah. So that was fascinating to understand that actually what's outside of us as human beings makes us inside.
It's an interesting one, because the epigenetics is something I've only just heard about or whatever, because you obviously talk about mindset and things like this and whatever, and say it again.
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics. That essentially you talk about the product of environment and stuff like that. There's a story there in terms of generations.
Yeah.
Stuff that goes on in generations, it
Yeah.
just keeps going,
Yeah.
affects the present as well.
Yeah.
So for me, that's quite an interesting thing, because you can literally just change. You could be born a certain way, but because of all that other stuff and that baggage, could shift you and change
Absolutely
you
right.
to be something that you weren't meant to be.
But the things that come into it, we use these words earlier on, and these words, I don't use these words in a religious context because people have different beliefs, right? So
Yeah.
whatever individual's belief is, we will all understand these words, which are belief, hope, love, and faith.
Yeah.
You know, and those words, they create who we are. You know, we don't need to subscribe to a certain type of understanding of what those words mean. We all know if we have belief and hope and faith in something and we love it, we have our passion, that creates an outcome, you know.
Yeah, which I believe, that we are wired that way naturally.
Absolutely,
we are. So, it's a case of the happiest we are, in a sense, is expressing those in its fullness.
Yes. Totally right. Yeah. And having that inner understanding and feeling about them, which is where this why do we feel the way we feel comes in. Because what is a feeling? What is an emotion? I mean, I remember when I started this journey and I Googled, what is an emotion? Because it's actually really difficult, isn't it? You ask different people, but I've now learned what an emotion is actually the creation of cellular reactions to a chemical environment created by the mind based upon what we think. Because if we think a certain way, certain parts of the brain kick in to create us for that stress reaction, the fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
And it creates that reaction, which is then becomes a physical feeling, like butterflies in the stomach or tightness or tension or whatever. That physical feeling of an emotion is created by a chemical reaction driven by instructions from certain parts of the brain. Right. I know that from a neurological point of view. That's what I know now.
Yeah.
So look, we're skipping ahead a little bit.
No, that's fine, yeah.
But where we got to was after researching this subject matter and epigenetics, the final one, which I got really excited about, and hey, if anyone says they understand this, they're telling you a fib, is quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement and quantum physics blew my mind, but with total excitement as well. And what it was the kind of final piece in the jigsaw. And what's really difficult, what's a positive challenge is that if I was to talk to most business owners and business people and say, hey, look, we're just a product of space dust, we're all energy, and they'd start thinking I was raving loony, and they probably wouldn't want me to come and work with them at their business because I was away with the fairies. But when I talk about it in a neurological, scientific and proven basis, that we are what we eat, we are what we consume, and we are what we think, that's how we become, and our outcomes are based upon our feelings, which determine the actions we make, and our outcomes is what we then become at one with ourselves and with other people and everything that we achieve in life. Now, my little tagline I use all the time is, what we think, we become.
Yeah.
Now, I challenge anybody in this room here today, and look at all the kit we've got around us and the mic and the shirt and everything. Name one material thing that was created by man, one man-made item. I just challenge anybody to create one man-made item that never started as a single thought in one person's mind. Wouldn't it be good if we went to the moon? You know, it always starts with wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be good if we had a microphone which can absorb? Wouldn't it be good if we had this radius arm that kept the mic in the right place? Wouldn't it be? It always starts as one thought in one person's mind. Sure, they get a team in afterwards to develop it, but it's always one thought in one person's mind that starts the man on the moon. Did he go or did he not? Hey, that's another story. It's always one person that creates the underground system. It's always, and that's the point, is whatever we as human beings think, this is what sets us apart from all the other species, that we can actually create an outcome just by thought.
That's for me, I think, at the heart of every single person is that ability to create.
Yes.
And I think purpose is an aspect to find out what is it that you're meant to create. Because everybody can create, but what is it that you're going to create, and understand that. So some people it might be music, for some people it might be a cure, for some people it might be, a new methodology, but essentially it's that's part of the excitement of life, is to work out what that thing is I'm meant to create.
Yeah, and isn't it all down to how you feel? Because when you achieve your sense of purpose, it's a feeling. Because if we didn't have feelings and if we didn't have emotions, we wouldn't be human beings. We'd be human doings.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the ability that to have a sense of purpose and fulfillment and all those columns that we all talk about that we need to have to achieve purpose in life and fulfillment. It all leads us to a sense of feeling how we feel. And what it took me to a place of all this little journey I've just mentioned was after researching and understanding those guys, you know, the big guys, and then after understanding all the subject matter, I found the answer. I found the answer which works, that demonstrates why human beings feel the way we feel, why we do the things we do, but also what we can do to be the best version of ourselves and that we want for us and our loved ones. But trying to get to that point was a struggle. I mean, that was 5 years of R&D and a PhD to get to that point.
Wow. Yeah.
And this next bit, I'm not wishing to be derogatory towards the Western medical sciences, but I just want to bring this in here as an awareness point, is that when I was in a pickle in 2015, I was in a bit of a mess, you know, and I didn't know how to move forwards. And when we don't know what we don't know, we kind of look for help and advice to who we deem as professional positions of authority. Yeah. So, of course, the first place is your GP, isn't it? The doctor. So you go to your doctor. So I did. I went to, and I explained, you know, and all they could do was put me on happy pills. Yeah. And I didn't know any better, so I did. I went on happy pills. But I remember becoming so numb on the positive side of the emotions, but also on the negative side of the emotions. So yeah, it did help me in a way because I was able to have a bit more clarity because I wasn't, you know, ping-ponging this roller coaster. But no one really understands the full challenge trying to get off these pills as well.
Exactly. It's easy to get on, but to get off is the same story. Yeah.
And that sense of coming off when you're walking down the road and it seems like the whole world is throbbing of like a disassociation with reality, and it's the most horrifying experience. However, that was one part that they said, you know, put you on happy pills. The other, of course, is say, well, we can try and get you some therapy or counselling or something. And oh my goodness me, the challenge with that is, yeah, we'll put you on a list. It might be up to 12 months. Now, when someone's in a state of mind of pure desperation, 12 months is an eternity.
Yeah, 100%. You know? Yeah.
It's just like,
particularly from where you've come from. You've written a note, you know, and then it's like, well, we'll stick you on a wait list. You know, it's like, wow.
And then the double whammy, of course, is we'll put you on a waiting list. But of course, when you start seeing somebody, we can normally do 6 sessions and then you have to start again. So there's a fear of abandonment straight away.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm just going to get... And this is not uncommon, you know. When I've spoken to other people, they feel exactly the same. Or they see one session with one person and they kind of pour their heart out. Then they go back for the second session and the first person's moved on.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's got, well, how does this work? Anyway, look, I came to a really swift conclusion that us as entrepreneurs, and you know, most people watching this will probably realise that as entrepreneurs, we do tend to think a little bit off-piece sometimes.
Yeah.
We do take risks differently to an employee type mentality because that's who we are. We are creators. We are people that create solutions to problems because that's what we are. And because of that, I found trying to work with a normal therapist, it didn't work. They didn't understand how I think, you know. And I remember, you know, if this counsellor lady watches this, I hope she takes this in the right way. I remember seeing a therapist once. I think she had the best intention. But what she said to me was, tell me something good about yourself. Now, I just want to say right here, right now, having worked in this industry for some years now, I know that's a golden question you never ask anybody that's in a dark place.
Right.
Never. Because if you ask somebody when they're in a dark place that they feel pretty crap about themselves, tell me one thing that's good about you. If they can't answer something good, it's a self-fulfilling negative prophecy for themselves to themselves that they really are crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can never undo that. So she asked me that question when I was in a really, really bad corner. And then she could see I was rabbit in the headlights because I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't honestly think of. And she looked at me and she goes, well, Ant, you've got very nice colour eyes.
Oh, wow.
So in a way, the thing that I take from that is nobody will take ownership of your solution any better than yourself.
Yeah.
We can try to get help from other people. We can try to get other people to take ownership of self. But actually, that's probably we could have a whole nother podcast about entitlement. That's what creates entitlement, is that people don't want to take ownership of self because they believe they're entitled for others to take ownership of themselves instead of NHS, whatever. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But I was on the verge of becoming entitled. And I realised, no, because if I go down that road, that gives the power to somebody else to fix me.
Yeah.
And then, if I don't have the power to fix me, that disempowers me. That makes me a victim.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a victim. I want to come out of this. I was nearly in that victim corner. So I need to move out of this and move in a way where I take ownership of my outcome. So what I did, I created my own methodology to move me from where I was to where I want to be. And what I did, I studied all those great minds and I brought together elements of CBT, NLP, all sorts of therapy, solution-focused therapy, hypnotherapy, all these elements, and looking at the neurological point of view of how the mind works, plus bolting onto that the entrepreneurial skills from since I was 13, and just a massive dollop of common sense. Right?
Yeah.
And I created this methodology called switched on thinking.
Okay.
And switched on thinking it's all in my book here.
Yeah. Give a plug.
Hey,
Where can we get it from? Yeah.
So this little book is called Quick Wake Up the Pilot. And Quick Wake Up the Pilot is a book covering the 43 modules. In fact, they're 43 change creation modules that take you from where you are to where you want to be in your mindset.
Yeah.
So you can have complete ownership of self to move forwards and be who you want to be in life, you know. And in fact, when people read this book, they'll notice that the very first paragraph it opens about, this book's all about you, isn't it? It's not about me as the author writing the book. This book's about you because you've got curiosity, you've got a problem you want to change, you've got something you want to create an outcome to. So quite rightly, this book is all about you. And this book, as I mentioned, takes people from where they are to where they want to be by equipping them with the right tools, the right mindset, but it's all based upon awareness. Okay? There's no hocus pocus, there's none of that. It's just about really good, clean awareness, because when we are aware of how we operate as a human being, we can do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of us, and this is a phrase I use all the time, most of us are completely unaware of what our unconscious mind is thinking, or the decisions that it makes 95% of the time. We're walking through life doing the things we've always done, getting the outcomes we've always got based upon our learnt behaviours, our skills, our values, our beliefs, our faith.
Yeah.
It's whatever we think unconsciously is actually who we are. If we could print a 3D printer into your or my mind, what it would print out is all of our past and what's around us today.
Yeah.
Because it's those values and beliefs and faith and hope and all that stuff which has created what we've got. Because if we were to change those thoughts, change the programming, the outcome would be different.
I think it's an important thing to reflect, is that a lot of people, they want to see change, but it's more comfortable complaining about things not changing and doing the same thing, rather than be brave enough to say, right, I need to fundamentally change something.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, so for me, it's like whenever I've been an entrepreneur, I realise that there may be a level I get to, and that's just the level that I'm going to get to unless I change something in terms of my thinking or a different approach, or the business pivots slightly or goes in a different direction, and then growth comes. And it's often that the plateaus come because it is time for change.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned is that it's to recognize those plateau times and know that change is coming, and then almost prepare myself for it by reading more, by listening to more podcasts, by giving myself the knowledge that when it's like, right now, the opportunity comes, I can move forward. So, I was saying to you on our walk, I think people wish we had cameras on our walk because we had a really good discussion.
It's brilliant.
But
we should have done the podcast walking.
You should have done the podcast walking. Hey, Ryan. Yeah. So
you'd be like Country File with the mic over our heads.
But the point of it is that I'm being made uncomfortable now because I've always talked about going global, working globally and traveling and stuff like this. And then it comes, like it's there. You just need to do this, and it's not going to cost a lot of money. And then just putting the card details in and pressing click and go, now I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then I realized, hang on a second, it'd be more comfortable to not do that. Just sitting there and then complain that we're not going global, or take that risk. And it was one of my team, Nathan, wherever he is, who said to me, you need to do this because that's part of the vision. And it was just that reminder of saying, the only reason you got as far as we've got is by being uncomfortable. Yeah. So you need to be uncomfortable. And it was just like, come from somebody else. And then it was like, I've clicked, I've pressed it, I'm flying out to America and I'm going out for 10 days. I haven't got all the answers. I don't know where, but I know that's part of the journey in terms of me doing something different to enable a different outcome. Yeah. And I think some of us get caught in this, are more comfortable complaining about it than taking the risk, if that makes sense.
It's perfect. It makes perfect sense. I mean, the only constant thing in our life is change. Yeah. Because otherwise we wouldn't have tomorrows.
Yeah.
The whole of life is cells which grow, divide, and die. Grow, divide, and die. That's what life is, isn't it? That's what we are. We're no different. And that's what it is. So we either stand still and we don't go through those pains of change and growth. But then if we stay still, actually, we're going backwards because time moves on. And if we stay today and make no change, we become yesterday, and then that becomes in the past.
And maybe that's it. Change for me, every time there is pain, there's always pain in change, regardless. If you move a house, it's like, it's a really difficult thing, and you're going through it at the time. Like we moved, and we've told the story a few times, but the reality is, on the other side of having been able to move, we've been able to do podcasts.
Exactly,
so there was a direct benefit, and you could argue that when that change happened, if I knew what I knew now, I would have done it quicker, if that makes sense.
Yes, and whatever you focus on. Because, you and I could sit here and we could talk about all the negatives of you moving home. Yeah. And I'm sure there could be great stories about the heartache and the hassles and the anxiety and the worries and all this stuff, right? But it doesn't change the outcome, does it? Or we can actually focus on all the good stuff that's come out of it. Yeah. It's the same shit we had to deal with, but it's looking at what came out of it, and that's the most important thing.
And I think that's it. And I think where it got me to is when I reflected on the biggest changes that we've made, it's always been first me being really uncomfortable.
Yeah, we have to.
And so me now, with the encouragement of Nathan or whatever, it was just like, I've committed to that flight and I'm going out there. I'm away from the family for 10 days on my own. And it's like, I'm not comfortable with that, but I know it's going to produce a different outcome. It's not just a holiday. I'm sure I have fun out there or whatever. It's uncomfortable for us. It's uncomfortable for us as a family. But then in order to go where we need to get to, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. And I think that just going to London, for example, going to London more frequently, which, originally it was all about Bristol, and it still is to some degree with our networks and stuff, but we're working more in London. And having worked more in London, I meet people like yourself. I wouldn't do that if not taking the risk, getting up early.
Exactly. Yeah.
And going on that journey. Yeah, it's comfortable, it's late nights or whatever, but changing that environment, changing the situation, changing the circle produces change. And so you meet different people and different environments produce differently.
It's so true. Because what I do now, we haven't really sort of completed the journey bit yet, but when I talk now, because what I do now is I speak at large events. So I speak to audiences and I run workshops about change and that kind of stuff. But one of the stories I always give now is, just imagine if you had somebody in your IT department was deciding to play up, and they changed the programming of your Excel spreadsheet without you knowing. Right? And they changed the programs. Every time you put 2 and 2, it always showed 5. Right? Just because they felt they could. Have a bit of fun at your expense. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how many times you change that input. As soon as you hit enter, you're going to get 5 from 2 and 2. Right? And until someone changes the programming that 2 and 2 makes 4, if the programming always says 2 and 2 makes 5, it's always going to deliver 5. And that's the way that the unconscious mind works. The unconscious mind doesn't rationalize or check through the validity of any learnt behaviors or any processing. All it does, it carries out what's always gone on before. So if we're running conscious or unconscious program in our minds that shows 5 from 2 and 2, we're always going to get that outcome.
Yeah.
And then I hear people say to me, well, how come I always end up with the same sorts of shoddy partners? Or why do I always have the same money problems? Or why do I always end up unhappy? Or why do... It's because of the programming.
Yeah.
I don't mean from a mind control. It's programming means just the values you've learned, the beliefs we've learned, the solutions that we've learned. And if we've got some 2 + 2 = 5 programming in our mindset, we got to change it. Otherwise, it's always going to be wrong.
It's an interesting one because one of the things I've noticed in purpose, for example, is that when you know what that purpose is, it's amazing how life begins to work to make sure that purpose is delivered.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's almost a life of its own.
Yes.
So like when you are comfortable, purpose determines that your life becomes uncomfortable. So you make the decisions based on purpose to produce the right outcome.
Yes.
And so what I ended up with is, that's where I went on to the whole thing of crisis, because crisis often comes and we go, oh my gosh, da, da, da. But the reality was, like we used the house example, me was talking about purpose. It's about amplifying that whole message. And we couldn't do the podcast where we were at. We couldn't do the podcast in our office because we had a woodcutter next door. But the catalyst to that was the crisis of the landlord that agreed to sell to us, then changing his mind within 2 weeks and says no. He hasn't sold his property still, by the way, a year on, by the way. But the point of it is that it then pivoted us out of where we were at into somewhere else. So then we're actually doing it now.
Yeah.
So it's almost like purpose's own thing was more important to drive the thing forward.
Yes.
And so their crisis came as a result.
Yeah.
And I think for me, when we talk about mindset and stuff, if you know what your purpose is, there is some degree of comfort in that because you know that there's a bit of an anchor or there's a bit of a guide to some of the stuff that you're changing. So I'm not being uncomfortable for uncomfortable's sake. I'm being uncomfortable because I recognize that things need to change to move me closer towards purpose.
I've got a question for you.
Oh, okay, here we go. Change.
I know, it's great. I know. It's the power of the mic.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a position where you've done a job and you honestly, in your heart of hearts, know that you could have done it better, right? But you've just done the job of the best. Maybe when you was a kid or a child or something way back when. You've done something and then someone's giving you really positive praise for it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes awkward.
Yeah.
That actually I didn't do that well. Have you ever had that feeling?
It's I've had it playing football, for example. You had an amazing game. You've done really, really well. And deep down, you're like going, I played better last week.
Yeah.
And you're like, and then you go away and go, well, how have they come to that conclusion?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take us to necessarily the most positive place in the end because we start to question. Whereas I honestly believe now is that whatever, I know you do this anyway, but always giving the best and being the best and doing the best sets us up for a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Whether we end up helping somebody else or not, that's a byproduct. But by us having that purpose to do the best, be the best, and give the best right up front, I don't hold anything back. When people ask me to talk like this on podcasts, I give my best.
Yeah.
I don't hold anything back as a secret that's in this book.
Yeah.
Because I give my best. However, the benefit of someone going through my book or my programs or my talks is they get the real me for a lot longer and we can explore more stuff, which is always really good. But I think that just by doing the best, being the best, sets us up for a positive outcome, whatever happens.
It's an interesting one because I've run a football team for a while, and we won a couple of things. And I remember one of the games. I think it was our second cup final. We won the first one, which is great, and that's a whole nother story. But I was more present in the second cup final as a manager, because in the first one I was player manager, and there were arguments over the colour kits and all kinds of stuff. So I literally didn't warm up for the actual game of the first cup final. We won it. I probably had the worst game like for the whole season in that game. I wasn't terrible, but like you talk about doing your best. I was like, we won the trophy, but I just didn't feel like I contributed in the way that I wanted.
Use the word feel.
And then the second cup final, I remember saying to the guys, because we were a bit under the cosh, and I just said, look, at half time, I said, all I'm asking of you here is that you don't leave at the end of the game with regrets. Do your best. If you have to run the extra yard, run the extra yard.
Yeah.
I said, because we've been in 2 cup finals in 2 years. That doesn't happen all the time. So that's the facts. And for most of you, as amateur footballers, you might not ever come to another cup final. We're fortunate. We're a damn good team and we've managed to go to 2. We might not go to 3. But what I'm saying to you is don't leave it with regrets. Put your best in.
Absolutely.
And that will take care of itself.
Absolutely right.
And we won.
Yeah.
You know,
Brilliant.
we won the second thing. And I remember them, reflecting. And weirdly enough, I think it was a year after that, was it that season, we disbanded the team in the end because for a myriad of different things, players retiring, we were trying to get a clubhouse to bring loads of young people through, and it fell through for us. So eventually it was like, we can only do so much, and we can only keep signing players so much, and then we were driving further and further to run. That's another story. But when people look back now, because those guys are older now, like 10 years on, they look back and they go, you know what? They sit back on their own, and occasionally you'll see them message on Facebook, or I get a text or whatever, and they're still reminiscing on the fact that because they put that extra bit of work in, they've got a really special memory, and it's created something that, in their life, they could tell their grandkids it's not the FA Cup final, but it was like the regional FA Cup final type thing. They can tell it of a successful outcome, or a story that they have, or a memory that they have, because they put the work in. They did their best. And for me, that's so now, if we had lost, but they'd done their best, then what more can you do?
Exactly.
And that for me is like, guys, leave it all out on the field. And if that's not enough, then it wasn't meant to be.
Absolutely.
But do your best. And I think for me, by doing your best and you're competing against yourself, no one else.
Exactly, yeah.
And how you feel about you is more important than how someone else feels about you, in a sense.
Yeah.
Not that you don't care what people think, but at the end of the day, if you know you've done your best, that's what matters.
Do you know what? And that takes me back to my purpose now, because what I would say to anybody listening to this, if anybody listening to this is being attracted to the wrong word, if they feel themselves falling into that corner where I went, there's only one way out of that corner, and that's doing your best.
Yeah.
Because it would have been very easy for me not to do my best. It would have been very easy for me to have taken that choice to disappear off this planet.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have been doing the best for me or my loved ones. And that's the point, that doing the best isn't always the easiest, is it?
No.
And that's the thing. But, it's not about doing the easiest, because if we wanted to do the easiest, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now, probably.
Exactly.
And it's about pushing ourselves through that pain, pushing ourselves through the change, and pushing ourselves to challenge ourselves, and doing the best and being the best, which actually creates the best.
Exactly. And I think that's it. The person that you're competing with, more than anything else, is yourself.
It is.
Being a better person than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you can build that into your life, then you've got half a chance of doing something good, and for me that's the most important thing.
I had a massive wake-up call probably only about 8 months ago when I realised what I'm about to say. And this isn't a preach or a religious statement or anything like that. It's just something which is reality, right? Because we don't all know what happens when we go, do we? We don't know what is after death. None of us know for sure. Sure, we have faiths and beliefs and opinions and attitudes and all that stuff, but unless we've been there, it's a kind of non-return ticket, isn't it? We can't play that out again. But what I did realise is that when life is over, when we come to the end of the day, our life as we know it doesn't exist anymore. Now, it doesn't mean that our kids and our loved ones don't carry on in life. Of course they do, but that's life as they know it, not as we know it. And that really was a massive wake-up call to me, you know, and I have to be so careful because when I get passionate, the odd F word slips out, and I don't mean it in an offensive way.
Yeah.
It's just passion, and I'm trying to be so careful today to keep my F's
that's
at bay.
good.
So
well done.
I'm doing my best.
And to be honest with you, there's a reason why we go down that route as well, because we find that a lot of the stuff that's on these podcasts is great for kids as well.
Absolutely.
You know, and
So
I've known
important.
entrepreneurs that love to drop the odd.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if they didn't, they would open up a whole new audience.
Yes, exactly,
because the
yeah.
youngsters need educating in all kinds of areas, and it's listening to podcasts and stuff like that. So thank you for.
Do you know what? You've just opened up a potential rabbit hole there, which I'd love to explore another day. And that is, why isn't this stuff taught to kids as we're growing up? It's like, let's learn about some life skills. In fact, like the University of Kent have asked me to run a pilot program for them, right? And this pilot program is called, and you'll get this. In fact, before I tell you the name of it, what they've said to me is they've got all the graduates that have gone through lockdown, gone through all the hassles for the last 5 years, and they're about to go into the workplace. But there's this massive void now between employers wanting to take people on because of all the restrictions and I want to work from home and I want entitlement and all this stuff. And then you've got all these people that have gone through graduation and coming into the workforce that don't really know their place in the world at the moment. Like, do I work from home? Do I stand my ground? Do I do as I'm told? And there's this massive void, and I call it the void of want. You know, because neither of them really want to be doing this.
Yeah.
And what the University of Kent have asked me to do is run a pilot program, and we've called it Life and Emotion Skills for Business. Right, and it just takes people. It creates the want, and what the whole pilot program does, and it's all based on switched on thinking. It creates the want in both sides. There shouldn't be sides, but there is at the moment. But it creates a want, and it creates the want for the graduates to want to work with commerce, and it creates the want for commercial opportunities and companies to want to work with these graduates, and it fills the void with want, because if they both want to find a solution and they both want to work together, it's happy days.
And I think, but that gap is created because the system is not teaching it early enough.
Correct.
You know,
Correct.
and for me, that's the big failure in the system. The gap, you will produce gaps if you're not, if you know that's a problem, you can fix it by putting that into the curriculum. And again, I can talk all day about purpose as well, and maximizing on people's strengths over just always looking for, this is your strength, this is your weakness, so let's clean your weaknesses up. But hang on a minute, what happens then is you never amplify the strengths. So you end up with producing average. So no one's brilliant at anything. And in fact, that's what an entrepreneur does. They find out what they're damn good at and then build a life around it.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit more on the whole switched on thinking. Just what is that? Is there a formula? Is it an acronym? What is it? Just so at least we can give people some more value on what switched on thinking actually is.
Yeah. Well, switched on thinking came out of my research and development, my R&D for 5 years and a PhD. And what switched on thinking does, it takes people through a bit of an awakening at first. And what I mean by that, and I'm not wishing to offend anybody, it shows most of us that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And it creates an awareness that actually perhaps I am pretty good at doing this, or I'm pretty rubbish at doing this. It brings a sense of awareness to self in the here and now. And this is the most important thing. It brings everything into the here and now. And the way that it does that is through my 43 modules. And these 43 modules, it goes through a really old methodology that used to be around of, I don't know if you've heard of this, it's called unconscious competence, then conscious and competence. Yeah, there's 4 cycles. And what I do is I take people through that, but in today's modern world. So I show people that we don't know what we don't know. And then I show people that we do know that we don't know it. Then I show people that how to be good at doing what they know, what they're doing. And then the last one is that they become unaware that they're good at it. So I'll give you an example. How many of us have driven a car and we've got home and we're thinking, was there a red traffic light there?
Yeah.
Did I need to run the granny over on the zebra crossing?
Yeah. You just totally done it on autopilot. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Autopilot is the key. And that's what this book is all about. I call it Quick Wake Up the Pilot, because it's all about, most of us spend most of our life living on autopilot.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what switched on thinking does. It switches on your thinking so you're not running on autopilot.
It's the classic thing of with the emergence of social media, you can just lose hours just scrolling mindlessly.
Yeah.
And then you go, where did those 2 hours go? And
Yeah.
then you've not enriched your mind with anything. You just watch cats jump off roofs or cars crash or whatever it may be. And I think that's the thing, is that in our education journey, we're in that zone. It's like we're on autopilot. We're just trying to get to we're 16 or we're 18 and then we're out of this place.
Yeah.
There's no enjoying the learning journey. It's more I'm being babysat, and once I'm 16 I'm on my own and I can make my own choices. So I'll put up with it. And I think it needs to be a lot more intentional. But here's the thing, because the measurements and the stats and they're driven, it's not driven that way. No. It's totally stacked in the area of teachers under pressure to get results, but it's not benefiting the people that are being educated. So in fact, you ask the teacher, they don't enjoy it. If you ask the kid, they don't enjoy it. So if you don't like, both of you don't enjoy it, surely then we need to change it to make it more enjoyable, that those formative years of your life are exciting.
I don't know if you've seen, there's one of the most, it's probably still the most watched ever TED Talk, Sir Ken Robinson.
Okay.
If you haven't seen it, and anybody hasn't seen this, just watch it. It's 19 minutes of Sir Ken Robinson. He's a fella that was an advisor to government on education. Okay. But what he talks about is, are schools killing creativity? And I've got to say, when I watched it, he's so engaging and entertaining. But actually, he brings the matter to a reality that this is a problem, because schools, we just want to create clones of types of people that are able to do types of jobs for industry, because it's back to the old industrial revolution model. Yeah. Let's create people that fit in that box, because those boxes need to be filled. And the measurement of the success of filling those boxes will determine your next year's funding, so you can do the same again. It's broken.
So the other thing of that is that when kids, there's a whole thing for formative years is that the kids learn through play.
Yes.
Then, which is, I believe, you're on the right track, and then you go into school and we stop playing.
Yes.
Play something you do at break time. So now you lose the ability to test and measure. But anyone knows in life afterwards, when you're working in the business and you're trying to grow, test and measure is all part of the process. So if you're going to set your business, you've got to test what works to decide, is that working? Are people going to pay for it and enjoy it? They're going to get the results. Do you know what you're talking about? But we lose that. We can't play anymore. We put our serious head on. And for me, it's that there's a disconnect between learn through play and then going into school, and then we just completely lose it. Oh no, we just got to get the results. Oh no, we've got to get the exams. And I think for me, the regression of the system now is that somebody's worth, somebody's value, someone's judgments is all done on like a 2-hour exam. And if they're having a bad day and they flunk the exam, their life is over.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't build a healthy society around that journey. It just doesn't work, because you're just saying, well, everything's around this moment. If you miss the moment, there's no point working with you.
I think what we're actually doing, we've created a society of people which are not allowed to create.
Yeah.
They have to be compliant.
Yeah, not thinking for themselves, not asking questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Part of my thesis, I had to do a whole report on the creation of entitlement. That was such an interesting situation, because entitlement comes from, as I mentioned earlier on, taking away for the ability to people to think for themselves. Yeah. Because when they don't think for themselves, they become a victim, and then we're down the whole road, as I mentioned earlier on. But that's what we need to do. We can't do anything in life unless we can create. We have to create a thought to create an outcome, to create an action, to create a feeling, to create. We have to create. If creation is taken away from us, we're back to being human doings.
Which is exactly what you said. It's like the education system flies in the place of being able to create. Yeah. And so basically the fruit of that situation is everyone becomes a victim. And because if now you're a victim, you're taking pills, you're getting labels, you're not going living life, you're now dealing with depression, anxiety. And that's all a symptom of you're not doing what you were supposed to do, which is be free enough to create. Correct. Now, I'm not saying that everyone is going to need, or everyone should be an entrepreneur. What I'm saying, because Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool is not an entrepreneur, but he's allowed to create a football team within a corporate environment, which is Liverpool Football Club, and he's living his best life. you know, and he might go to another corporate company to do that again. I hope not, but eventually he will leave Liverpool. And the point is, he's going to do the same again there. But he's living his best life. He's creating his own team, his environment, or whatever, his way of playing. And so he's creating. It's just being in an environment that allows us to create, makes us happier people when we're given the space and the tools to be able to do it.
One of my talks that I give is actually got the word create in it. And one of my talks, and this always goes down so well, not always at first, I might add.
Yeah.
And this talk it's called this, that today is never too late to create the tomorrows you truly want. Because we have to create our tomorrows, and that's this whole line. We have to create what we want. We have to create tomorrows from today, but today is never too late, because what's age? Age is just a demonstration of the stuff we've done before. But the only reality, of course, is the here and now. You know, we're all in this here and now together in this room at the same time, but we've all got different years behind us. But it doesn't change the fact that we're all still here today.
It's an interesting one, because what I think we're losing is that spontaneity.
Yeah.
And it was like the other day, you know, wouldn't it be great if I go on a business trip and I could take the whole family? That was one of the things we've talked about as a family. And then HBBA in Scotland was being launched, and it was like, well, I'm going up, you know, I'll probably get a flight or whatever. And it was like, well, why don't we just turn it into a road trip?
Yeah.
Because, you know, the kids have been busy. They working over the summer holidays as well. So they don't have 6 weeks off. We maybe give them a couple of weeks off and then they keep going. And it was like, let's just do it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was 2 days. We drove all the way up to Scotland and we drove all back. But it was an adventure.
Nice.
And just the 6 hours drive up there, we were all talking and engaging and whatever. We stayed, we did the event, and then after it, and we come back. And it was like we had been away for a longer period of time. But that, you know, it was just creating a moment, creating an experience, rather than go, what if, or I wonder if. No, why don't do it now?
It was a state of being, not just doing.
Yeah.
You didn't just do the road trip.
No.
You were part of it. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was part of the journey. Well, Dr. Ant, it's been absolutely brilliant to get you on the sofa, and thank you so much. How will people be able to reach out and get in touch with you and find out more about how you can help them?
Yeah, so good old Google always has the answer. So you can Google me, Dr. Ant, the Brain Whisperer. You find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, again, Dr. Ant, the Brain Whisperer. So, and if you guys are needing any help out there with someone to come in to help, you know, refocus the team to deal with change or stress or worries or concerns, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I show people how to think what they need to think to get to the outcome that they want, either for themselves or for their teams.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Purpose People podcast. You can obviously see us on YouTube, where you can see our wonderful setting here that we film every time we do a podcast. But you can also listen to us just in your ears on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Google. Please like and subscribe to YouTube, and please leave a review on our podcast. It really helps us get the message out that can help people live a life on purpose for purpose. We want to help you make purpose a priority.